First of all, Europe needs to realize that our main goal with the European AI Act, at least right now, we didn't really achieve. It's a really weird situation where we, with those digital laws, want to restrain US big tech, but in the end, we are helping them by creating a lot of rules that safeguards that we were definitely killing innovation.
Do founders need to break some rules to get ahead in AI?
Yes. COVID was maybe an exception where Europe indeed was rather fastly reacting to a crisis.
We have to adjust the whole system fast. And I think maybe Trump could be an enabler. Hey everyone, and welcome back to LuminaTalks. And in today's episode, we're diving straight into Europe's AI rulebook with Kai Zenner. And he's the head of office and digital policy advisor for Axel Voss. And if you've been following how Europe is shaping AI law, you've definitely came across his work. Kai's right at the center of it. It's balancing innovation with compliance, while helping design how Europe approaches AI safety, foundation models, and governance. So whether you're building AI infrastructure, products, or even thinking about it, this one is for you. Because if Europe really wants to lead in AI, we've got to get this balance right. And Kai is one of the few people who's actually shaping how that happens. Kai, I already introduced you, but how did you first get pulled into the world of AI policy and digital regulations?
So I started my time in Brussels at the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, and there as a research associate, I was already dealing with digital policy. But since I joined the European Parliament in 2017, Axel Voss, my boss, and I focused really strongly on AI and data policy. And yeah, we were kind of one of the few people in 2017-18 who had already a little bit of background knowledge in AI, and therefore, yeah, we stick to that basically, and we grew more and more into the topic. We wrote own initiative reports in the parliament, kind of shaping where the EU is heading, and then also became very active on the European AI Act. My boss was shadow rapporteur, it's called, so representing our political group in the negotiations. And with ChatGPT, everything exploded, a lot of attention on the topic. And yeah, for us, we really developed, let's say, from being in a niche field and then becoming more and more mainstream with AI policy, which is kind of funny to see from within also.
Okay, great. And from someone outside the policy world, how would you explain what you really do on a day-to-day basis?
It's a good question. And it depends when you are asking me. So right now, in Brussels, everyone is waiting for the new European Commission to come up with new policy proposals, new laws, but also there is currently a simplification agenda. So we are trying to reduce regulatory burden. We are trying to maybe focus more on investment programs, on policy initiatives that, I don't know, facilitating joint ventures from companies and so on and so on. So probably this policy term from 24 to 29, it will not be so much laws, but more, again, trying to bring companies together, trying to make things better. If you would have asked me in 2022 and 2023, back then it was really all about the legislative process. So back then, I personally was trying to write down the AI Act in a innovation-friendly way, trying to convince my colleagues from other policy groups that those wordings or those sentences make sense. And of course, they had different perspectives. And in the end, as we are in a democracy, we needed to find a middle ground. And this is kind of typical for Brussels. Depending on the year, on the month, you have often very different focus areas and very also different topics. It's never really the same. So you need to stay agile and dynamic in your personal perspective also.
Okay. And over the years, what's the most surprising thing that you've learned working in this area?
The most surprising thing, I would say, and now I'm focused really on policy, on the legislative policy cycle. As a citizen, or before I started to work as a student, I was always thinking that there is a political master plan behind certain initiatives coming from Brussels, coming from Berlin or Paris or Roma or whatsoever. But yeah, after working now many, many years in politics, I see how chaotic it often is, how much chance actually plays a role in policy outcomes. And it's not only positive, this, let's say, realization that many things that are coming out of this policy machine do not really make sense, and in the end as a result of very chaotic policy negotiations. And I don't know, some of our audience people have heard about the Mario Draghi competitiveness report and also other initiatives to restructure the policy cycle, reform politics. And this, I think, as a final statement, is really necessary because there are many good intentions, but the way how we are working on laws, on policies, often do not lead to evidence-based politics that are really working in the end in real life.
But it's of course due to the complexity of Europe. All the countries, they have to be aligned. It's easier said than done. I think I can imagine how hard it can be sometimes, especially nowadays. So yeah, really, that's also why I wanted to meet you and also other people in the area to understand better. And I think not only myself, but also the listeners to say, okay, but how does this really come to a certain conclusion, to a policy, and how does this affect me as a citizen, as an entrepreneur? And I think that this discussion today will be very helpful, insightful for them. So thanks again for joining. Hey everyone, I see a lot of comments from viewers who didn't realize they weren't subscribed. So I've got a small favor to ask. Please take a moment to double check if you're subscribed to the channel. It's a quick, free action that really helps keep everything we are doing here on track. But here is the thing. This isn't just me working on the show. I've got an incredible team of talented professionals behind the scenes. And your support makes all the difference in allowing us to keep delivering high quality content. Every time you subscribe, you're not just supporting me. You're supporting an entire team dedicating to make the show the best it can be. Thank you for being part of our journey. You're helping to shape the story we're telling together. And I'm truly grateful for that. So go ahead and double check your subscription. And thank you once again for being such an important part of our community. So, running a data and AI consultancy firm like Sumlink and building new AI ventures, I got sometimes questions like, what do these new AI rules actually mean for me, for my product, for my team, for my business? And to be honest, I get it. Regulations are often sounds like roadblocks. But what if they are actually opportunities to innovate, to differentiate, and also build trust? And that's what I want to dig in today. So Kai, from your point of view, as someone who is really deep inside Europeans' AI policy making, what are the 3 things every founder should know about the AI Act and Data Act?
Yeah, First of all, the European Union originally had a very good idea. They wanted actually to build a rather high-level regulatory framework that is most of all leading to legal certainty. So, as you said, giving AI firms, especially young startups, the possibility to innovate in AI, to develop AI, but also to deploy AI without having any risk of huge liabilities, of having the risk of facing large fines from enforcers, national enforcers, or the European Commission enforcing, and so on. And the second part of our whole European AI strategy was actually on top of this legal certainty via a regulatory framework, invest a lot of public money in promising projects, use public procurement initiatives to again help in commercial initiatives, and so on and so on. This, I still think, is a very good idea, but unfortunately, the European AI Act, the end product as law, didn't really achieve this original objective because, as you said, right now many founders of AI firms have this feeling, okay, I don't really know what to do in order to become compliant with the European AI law. There are a lot of risks for me to make long-term investments in AI and so on. So first of all, Europe needs to realize that our main goal with the European AI Act, at least right now, we didn't really achieve. And therefore, as I said already, there is now this attempt with simplification to readjust the AI Act, but also other digital laws. And to your question, main question, what can founders now do is, well, first of all, work together. There are a lot of networks, trade associations, startup alliance, and so on that are trying to help each other to join forces. Secondly, in those initiatives, work on best practices, because even the regulators right now don't really know how rules should be understood, what are the best ways to do it, and therefore very likely best practices will show the direction companies in the end should go, and probably they will be accepted by regulators in the end. And the third thing that my boss, Axel Voss, is always doing right now, don't be too hesitant, just try it. Because, again, going back to my second point, regulators themselves, for example, in Germany, the Bundesnetzagentur, the enforcer for the AI Act, are not really ready. And therefore, of course, you should not go against key principles of data privacy or of our legal system, but don't try to do everything perfect. No one is perfect right now. So we really hope that entrepreneurs are still having their entrepreneur spirit right now and trying out and actually in a close dialogue with regulators, but also with other companies, are really trying to make the best out of Europe and develop European AI products that can become competitiveness or even on a world stage or global stage.
Them and more or less see them as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I'm going slightly back to what I said already. The AI office has the big advantage that they have at least some money for building up rather fast a structure, hiring enough people, and so on. Countries like Cyprus, Malta, Bulgaria, and so on, they really struggle right now to find AI experts to build up this governance system and so on and so on. So for a company from Bulgaria, but also for a company from Belgium and so on, I think the AI office right now is the best contact to reach out to if you have questions. Also to show that you are willing to comply with the rules. If the AI office then is not able to give you an advice or is not coming back to you, you kind of showed best efforts. And with that, you can feel much safer that you are playing by the rules or that you at least try to get more clarity, let's say. So I would really advise you and people that are coming from the AI community to use the AI office to enter a regulatory dialogue with them, to get help. And especially next year, you should find a lot of regulatory sandboxes across the European Union, because in August next year, all 27 member states should at least have one regulatory sandbox. And the regulatory sandbox, many companies know already from the financial area. And our big hope is that those, let's say, mechanisms in the future are really bringing together companies and the public sector and, kind of scaling up this regulatory dialogues that I was talking about between companies and AI office all across the European Union, and that we then have a lot of parallel situations where data protection authorities, startups, fundamental rights organization, trade associations, and so on are coming together and are together trying to make sense of certain laws like the AI Act, working together on best practices, but also maybe join forces in certain projects that seem very, having a high potential and so on. So I think the more and more time we have, the more and more optimistic I am to close this statement. But yeah, for the next month, again, just to underline, there will be a lot of legal uncertainty. And the best thing companies can do right now is to be very proactive, to reach out to the AI office, to everything else that is now popping up on national level, and show that you are willing to play by the rules. That is everything you can do right now.
Of course, AI, it doesn't stop at borders. It's really a more global phenomenon, especially myself, clients worldwide. Yeah, how do we see then those rules? Also, not to forget that not only myself, but also other company founders around me, they see often AI regulations more for lawyers and not helping them in doing more faster business and be more competitive compared to other companies are outside Europe. How do you see this?
It's a very good question, and in particular with the new Trump administration in the United States, we are really in a different time compared to 2 years ago. When the AI Act was envisioned in 2018, we had a rather liberal world order, or constructivist, like you say in political science, where countries, even though they had different approaches, were agreeing on a set of core principles, going back to the OECD principles from 2019, G20 principles in 2020, and so on. So back then, I would say companies would not have this problem that if they want to sell on a global level, they are facing completely different regulatory frameworks or policy frameworks, because countries were trying to streamline, for example, things like risk management systems, quality management systems, accident notifications, and so on. This has all changed. And indeed, as you said, right now, there are very different approaches worldwide, which will make it very difficult for a European company that is kind of compliant with the AI Act to sell their products, for example, in the United States. Probably there, it's right now easier for companies to innovate because there are less rules. So, as I said, for the next month, I'm also quite critical. I think European companies active in Europe have it rather difficult, especially those that are passive, as I already underlined, and are waiting for something to happen. And this is why I was saying those companies that are proactive, that are trying to do the best they can, that are reaching out to other folk, to public authorities, and maybe also closely monitoring what is happening on an international level when it comes to international standardization, ISO standards, what the OECD is doing, IEEE. I think those companies will do best because you need to start somewhere. And therefore, I think, again, taking, for example, now an ISO standard for risk management or quality management system is probably the best you can do, because Europe doesn't have clarity what our own standards are. So if you are taking something that is already out there, it's probably the logical choice.
Yes, but and that's now my own experience, and of course, again, also the people around me here in the Ghent ecosystem. We have a lot of startups. I think the main pain point from not only regulations, law, standards, it's often seen as you have to tick the boxes, and it's not enough tangible for these organizations to really incorporate that. Why? To be honest, it's complex, it's often not really clear, and if it's clear, still it's just you have to implement it. But in general, it's also linked to culture, because if you would like to be let's say security first, you would like to data oriented, then also but if you're building AI systems, they have to comply to in HR very strict regulations, for example. On so many levels there is regulations, in a way, standardization, or at least where you have to prove that you have done the things that you should do to comply, in a way, what's for you in your, or one as you as company, but maybe you sell to a certain sector, banking, they have then the NIST or other types of regulations to sell that your product. And I think that's, let's say, in my feeling, often the complexity where we're living in Europe, that it's so fragmented and very tick the boxes, very not tangible for entrepreneurs to really do it. And because it has such a big impact, in my opinion, is that also a feeling that plays on your level, that you understand the pains that we have?
Yeah, no, totally. It depends a little bit to which political group you are talking. Some, of course, have a more innovation-friendly approach. Others are more concerned about fundamental rights protection and so on. But I would say almost all political groups realized what, by the way, my boss and I were saying for a long time, that we created a lot of digital rules with our digital laws that indeed were making large companies even more powerful, because they have the financial means, but also the manpower, the staff power to comply with certain laws, to pay expensive lawyers, accounting firms, and so on, to kind of do what they are asking. And all the smaller market players are either not compliant at all, or are paying way too much money that is then not available to be spent in further innovating, in creating new product lines, and so on and so on. I mentioned already the Draghi report, which was on European declining competitiveness. I mentioned already my criticism of how we are creating laws in the past. So I would say there is a little bit of a mind shift here in Brussels. People are more and more aware that indeed we are creating legislative monsters that are in the end only leading to check the boxes, but often not even achieving those policy goals. It's often not really creating more or stronger consumer rights, more consumer choices, more diverse market. In the end, it's often even counterproductive. As I said, we are creating a situation that is favoring big platforms from the United States, for example. But to really address those issues that we are now discussing, or to really revert lawmaking, we would need to change the structure here in Brussels. We would probably need new European treaties. We would need to really change, for example, the setup of committees in the European Parliament. We need to change DGs in the Commission. And there, I guess everyone who is listening can think about their own national government, how difficult it is to change the working methods in politics. And until now, no one really was willing to do that. But my impression, and many researchers from universities, Karl Löwen, for example, are agreeing that without that change of working methods, we will not create different types of laws, which again will always lead to the same problems that you were mentioning, that in the end it checks the boxes, it's making lawyers and accounting firms richer and richer, but not really promoting innovation from Europe, because our European companies are struggling.
I'm happy you have understood my point. But also, one of the things what really I sometimes feel very annoyed about is the slowness of the vehicle of Europe. Of course, it's due to all those countries that tries to have their say in the final decision, of course. While if you compare, for example, US, India, China, it's one government. The government decides everything, and let's move on. Everything goes so much faster, where technology nowadays to make improvements for your country, for your region, it's the driver, is the engine, it's your fuel of your engine. How fast can Europe change that and keep the same pace as they are doing it, while we have a more complex system with multiple countries? How is Europe looking to these kind of decisions? Is that, or are we looking sometimes too much, and are we not leading enough, and are we sometimes too much a follower? How do you see this from your policy point of view?
We both feel Europe is too much concentrating on other issues, on what is happening in the United States, and so on and so on. And indeed is for a long time, as you said yourself, a kind of follower. We are reactive. You saw it on a lot of points. I would say COVID was maybe an exception, where Europe indeed was rather fastly reacting to a crisis. Again, reacting because we didn't really prepare. But in digital points, also in AI policy, what is still missing is really a vision. The European Commission is talking very often about the European way to digitalize, or European way to artificial intelligence, but it's not really clear what put ahead compared to China, to Israel, to Canada, to the United States. And instead, we are waiting to see what Trump is deciding next, and so on, and so on, and so on. So this, in our opinion, in my opinion, is definitely the wrong way. You said yourself, we like certain ways to do value-based politics. We want to have a legal framework. Probably it's not really fitting to our culture to do now something similar to Donald Trump, to get rid of all legislations that we have and let our companies freely innovate. We probably should find a kind of middle ground. So definitely to go away from those check the boxes, useless policies that don't really have a positive impact in the end, but still decide on certain values that we want to push forward. So maybe there is a way to preserve privacy rights, but in a way that is not leading to a lot of red tape. So maybe we can push in certain areas at least for less energy consumption, more sustainability by rules without harming innovation or not or making our innovation so expensive. But again, Europe is not really, and politics are not really focusing on that more positive approaches, so creating something on ourselves, but staying reactive. So this would be my more geopolitical statement, but a quick reply also to your point on being extremely slow as political system. Indeed, Europe is way behind when it comes to adjusting our economy, our political system, but also our let's say products on the digital advancement. And our political system is, like with the GDPR, creating of a legislative framework that is often outdated when it becomes get into force or becomes applicable. We hopefully learned a little bit from that. You see it now with the AI Act that is depending very much on technical standards that are developed at Zenner. There are also a lot of guidelines, there are a lot of delegated acts and so on. So compared to the GDPR, the AI Act will be much more dynamic and hopefully more capable to go with the technical development. And a last positive point, again, the regulatory sandboxes in the future should enable a constant dialogue between companies, public authorities, and so on, and hopefully leading or creating a situation where both are constantly updating and informing themselves on what is necessary, what was wrongly decided in the past, what should be adjusted, and so on and so on. But we are definitely not there yet. But the main point that I want to make is that I feel policymakers have understood and are trying to readjust the way, especially for the digital field, they are trying to do policies.
The AI Act isn't a legal footnote. It's Europe's bet on writing the global rulebook. So if you're building an AI, you will either master compliance or you get mastered by it. So there is the question, will regulation become Europe's greatest advantage, or do you think it will hold us back? So, all right, Kai, welcome to the hot take timer. You've got 1 minute per question, no long answers. So just your thoughts. Let's go. So the first question, if you had to change one article in the AI Act tomorrow, what would it be and why?
From the very beginning, Article 25 was my favorite article because our regulation is focusing too much downstream on companies that are commercializing products and services and so on, and kind of leave big platforms, upstream companies off the hook and almost force them to support downstream companies to become compliant. What kind of documentation needs to flow along the AI value chain and so on? Because I'm a big believer that we need to readjust how companies work together. Even though I believe in the free market, we as politics should help smaller players to engage with powerful gatekeepers.
The second question. Do you think Europe's strict AI rules will make it harder for companies to innovate? You often called the regulatory cold, or will they set a global benchmark for responsible AI?
I'm very afraid that it will stifle innovation, that it will make it very hard for European companies to innovate, to give them enough legal certainty. Then I'm becoming more optimistic because I feel that public authorities, but also companies and so on, are more and more cooperative, are willing to work together. And by then, I hope that things like regulatory sandboxes, digital innovation hubs, and so on will work better and better. If it's then not too late, the AI Act could become a global benchmark because other regions will see that it makes sense that companies feel they know what they should do. But until then, we will have probably problems in Europe.
Third question. How should the EU handle foundation models trained on copyrighted data? License, fair use, and a carve-out? How do you see this?
Super tricky question that the EU will probably look further into is an idea to reopen the copyright directive, to adjust the text and data mining exemption in the copyright directive. I don't think, honestly, this is a good idea because there is already so much legal uncertainty. So my hope would be that companies and public authorities are using the proposal that you find in the Code of Practice on a GPI model that was recently being adopted or approved by the European Commission. Try to make it work, but this would be my big plea, to now not try to reinvent the wheel, try to use what the Code of Practice on GPI model is proposing.
The fourth question. If a startup ignored the AI Act for a year or so to get and to go for the market first approach, what would realistically happen?
I kind of indicated it already that I believe that public authorities, the European Commission, but in particular national competent authorities like the Bundesnetzagentur in Germany, will not have the capacities in terms of staff, in terms of financial capabilities, in terms of just being organized to really enforce on a large scale. So my feeling is, if you are not doing intentionally something wrong over the next 12 or 24 months, you are rather safe if you are again showing that you have best efforts. I think this is a rather safe approach until the enforcement capabilities are more in shape.
The fifth question. Where's the line between protecting citizens and killing innovations? And are we getting it right at the moment?
Definitely not in the past. In our view as EPP group, we were focusing too much on addressing all potential negative outcomes, and by creating a lot of rules that safeguards that were not based on evidence, we were definitely killing innovation. I hope that the new mindset that I was talking already a lot about is changing that, and we are finding more balanced approaches. You should not just create safeguards because you like to do it. In the end, you should only have safeguards that are effective in preventing severe negative outcomes. But again, I really hope that this new mindset you can find here in Brussels is leading to such an outcome.
That was a fun one. And it reminds me why we do what we do within Sunlink. People look at the AI Act and they see limits. We see structure, the kind that we can spark smarter innovation. Regulations aren't there to stop us. They're here to raise the bar. And if you treat them to that way, they can become the biggest advantage. And at Sunlink, we help teams make the unknown known. We go way beyond building data platforms. We design data and AI, agentic systems that solves real problems nowadays. And through our Pulse Lab venture, we turn those systems into ventures that scales across Europe, not just here in Ghent. So if you are working on something in platforms, in data or AI, and you want to build it right, without slowing down innovation, let's talk. We love teaming up with people who want to turn Europe's rules into launchpads for the next wave of AI innovation. Now we can go to the next chapter, the innovation versus the regulation. The first question here is, can Europe combine strong rules with vibrant innovation? One of my main concerns nowadays is both for our consultancy firm and the companies that we're building in AI infra and products is Europe is, to be honest, a wealthy region with amazing talents. We have the best universities, but innovation sometimes lacks. We have to be honest with about that, compared to other regions worldwide. And partially, it's not only the regulations, but it's also the financials. But partially, it's also the over-regulations, what you already mentioned. So many founders I know are worried about this tension. How do you protect the rights and the safety, but without stifling competitiveness?
So basically, for many, many years, trade associations like Business Europe, Digital Europe, but also the national trade associations were pleading the European Union to do more principle-based digital legislation, digital laws. Again, I do believe that with the AI Act, we already went a very positive step towards this direction to become more principle-based. But again, the AI Act in certain areas is too prescriptive, too much detailed, and so on. If you look to older digital laws, it's even more severe that, certain things are described there that are making maybe sense for one sector, but for many others not. So basically, in the future, I think, especially as the European Union, Juncker, the former Commission president, was always saying the European Union should reoriented to the principle of subsidiarity and focus on the big things and leave the small things to member states or not regulated. And I think this principle needs to be pushed very strongly again, because I do believe that with regulation we can promote our European values, but we cannot do it if we are obsessed with regulating every use case, addressing every potential risk and so on. Because if we do that, as you said yourself already, we create a paradise for consultancy firms and for law firms. But in the end, we are creating a monster that is not leading to a regulatory monster that is not leading to the outcomes that we wanted to achieve, because you cannot prevent every negative scenario with a law.
And let's say also startups that I spoke in the last year, they see often these regulations as, it's written for the big tech. Is this a fair comment from them?
Yeah. So it's not, yes, first of all, but now my argument would be that it's by almost no one intentionally done. It's a side effect, again, how we regulate. no one, so especially in the last years with the DMA, with the DSA and so on, many policymakers, the commission presidents wanted to restrain big techs in certain market activities. But again, our rule books, how they are being constructed, how they are being enforced, in the end, unfortunately, favor large companies that have the resources to hire legal experts, that have the knowledge, and so on and so on. So it's a really weird situation where we, with those digital laws, want to restrain US big tech, but in the end, we are helping them and we are making them even more powerful. I can just repeat myself. My big hope is that we learned the lesson, and in the future, we will try to do it differently.
That's also one of the trade-offs as a startup is, yeah, but you have to be compliant to, let's say, GDPR. That's the easiest way. You have to just adjust some processes, your systems left and right. It's not that complex, but still you have to invest money, resources as a startup where you have barely money left to do something. You try to invest money that will enable more business by, for example, hiring a sales or hiring a developer to build your product and put this in the market. I think that's the main issue nowadays, is that compliancy is often, let's say, second thoughts, because it's not enough enabling businesses to say, no, compliance and the regulation should come first, because this will lead to global expansion, even as a startup, or international in Europe sales or something else. And I think if we can change that in a way, and I think it should come from maybe both sides. I think it's the responsibility of the companies to say to the regulators, to say, hey, this is what we need. We need a regulation that's enabling us. But on the other hand, maybe with exceptions. For example, startups, yeah, to be honest, they have no money. And if they have money, they have to build a product or a service to grow and scale because they have investors. Where, for example, here in Europe, you have on so many levels regulations. In US, more or less, they don't mind, they just do their thing and they build the best product, and they can even scale it in a bigger area than, for example, a Belgian or a France or in Germany company. I think we are also fragmented. So I think as Europe region, we make it ourselves also complex on that level. And I think if Europe understands that and tries to solve that problem, then I'm convinced this will be an enabler, a driver of more innovation in a very short period. Do you see that as well, or?
No, definitely. Also here, I'm criticizing the European Commission quite heavily because certain things they are doing in the digital field I don't like at all. But especially, as you said, there is now also finally the understanding in the Commission that without capital market union, banking union, but also, for example, without a 28th regime, so similar legal frameworks all across Europe that are enabling startups to scale up and so on, we will never achieve a higher competitiveness. We will never, make use of all this amazing talent, as you mentioned, that we have here in Europe. So we need to, let's say, advance European integration in certain areas in order to really make use of all of our advantages in the digital field. Where the regulatory world can definitely help, and you partially also mentioned it at the beginning of your question, is to try out new regulatory approaches. So you were talking about size. So for example, you could think about further pushing SMEs and startup exemptions in certain areas. For example, free startups of documentation obligations, for example, if that makes sense. So sometimes size, or let's call it age, how long a company exists, could lead to different regulatory obligations. Maybe another idea, because size, for example, when it comes to privacy violations, doesn't really matter. Small companies can create huge privacy violations, bigger ones maybe not, because of the area they are working on. In those areas, maybe a real risk-based approach in laws makes more sense. The AI Act tries to do it with the risk pyramid. I don't think it's really convincing how it is in the end, but at least the idea, I think, makes sense. And hopefully in the future, we as regulators will create better outcomes than the AI Act, because I do believe that focusing on very risky areas and there make it more tough for companies to comply, to increase the rules, the regulatory burden, makes sense. But at the same time, this should mean that in those areas that are not risky, there are almost no rules, for example, except certain transparency stuff similar to the AI Act. I hope in this direction we are going, and this will definitely help a lot.
Also, an important upcoming event is November 18. The Commission will propose a digital omnibus that could amend or even withdraw parts of the AI Act. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? What's driving it? And is this the right moment for such change?
So it's all connected to this realization by many people here in Brussels that we definitely regulated too much in the past, that I made a visualization of all existing digital laws with a few think tanks. We count right now 101 applicable digital laws coming from Brussels. Of course, it's way too much for every company, but especially for our SMEs and our startups that are the backbone of our European economy. But yeah, finally, the European Commission, the member states, the parliamentarians want to reduce that number and want to tackle overlaps, contradictions with, as you said, especially the digital omnibus, but also similar packages that could come later, and then maybe go even deeper in the direction of a GDPR reform and so on and so on. In principle, this is very good, especially if it would, for example, streamline in parallel obligations. Let's take an example of cybersecurity. You have a cyber attack as a company and you have 8 legal obligations to notify public authorities, but it's 8 different public authorities and 8 different templates of the same cybersecurity attack. Right now, it's the case. Of course, it's crazy, and we should change it as soon as possible. My big fear with the digital omnibus, however, is going back to the legal uncertainty that we have right now with the AI Act and so on. We should really reduce this legal uncertainty as soon as possible. But a digital omnibus will, in fact, mean that we have now a new discussion on how the AI Act should look like, which will probably take 1 or 2 years. So my feeling is, for companies, it's actually not really helpful, because they still cannot really be sure that the AI Act is the final text. So it means you still don't have the necessary legal certainty to do long-term investments, because maybe you are now working on a quality management system based on Article 17 in the AI Act, but maybe the digital omnibus will try to delete this whole article. So maybe all of your investments in this quality management system are in vain. And this is really, in my opinion, a sign of very bad policy making, if this is really coming, because you are making it even worse with something which originally has a good intention, but was really not well thought through.
good intention, bad execution in a way. I understand that the objective is to create it, to give companies in Europe more, let's say, power in a way to succeed. And I think I vouch for that. But on the other hand, it creates so much extra layers, complexity that companies try to avoid. And I think, for example, I'm also part of, let's say, a voucher for the EU Inc. Or part. I think it is the same part. I think everything what Europe initiatives it's really nice, but it always stays very superficial, very not tangible. And of course, again, so many countries involved. I understand that, but the idea of having one type of organization for, I'm starting a company in Germany or in France or in Belgium with EU Inc. I don't know what will be the identity of it, an SA or an MV, it doesn't matter, but at least where you can work within that entire range. Of course, the complexity is also the culture, the language, and other things, but at least you can do with one organization business from your own origin. That's also an enabler. And the same thing is, this will take so much time and effort on that level to really get to something. The question, what will it be? And that's the same also with the AI Act. Okay, you also just mentioned it will take 2 years, but AI is evolving lightning speeds. If you can imagine where we were 2 years ago and where we are today, the policies can be outdated for all the new things at that moment. So how they will anticipate on that, they can't, probably not, because they don't know it by the time it's signed by every country. How do you see this? What are the things they should do to follow the pace of technology and the pace of the companies that are willing to do international business?
First of all, again, I do believe that with regulatory sandbox, with harmonized technical standards, with expert groups that really matter in what they are saying and are being taken serious, we are partially going in a better direction of laws that are not fixed for 10 years and are becoming completely outdated, but getting constant updates and so on. Of course, it at the same time requires companies to always monitor what is happening, but in the end, I think it's going in a better direction of dynamic laws that are going on par with the technological advance. Let's see if it's all happening as planned. I think we need a few months or years to change the policy cycle or machine. But there I do feel we are in a good direction. When you said or talked about EU Inc., I think this is actually right now is a bigger problem because especially with EU Inc., and you know it's closely connected to the 28 regime project of the European Commission, we see what I would say is the biggest problem right now, a lack of ambition, a lack of coordination, because we actually are quite sure what the key problems are in Europe, but there is no political will to really address them. Which brings me back to 28th regime. Everyone is saying this is a good idea. This would actually help, or could help in theory. But right now, to give you feedback from the latest discussion, the idea from the Commission seemed to be to go with a not really harmonized directive. So in the end, have 28 regimes, allowing a German legal form for companies, Belgium legal form, and so on, going completely against the idea of EU Inc., going completely against the idea of a 28 regime. Why is that? Not because people don't like the idea, but because they lack ambition. They feel like, yeah, it will be difficult. There will be a lot of pushback. It's not possible with all the crises around. So let's settle for a big compromise which, however, in the end will not work and will not make anyone happy. So yeah, we are trying to to push for more ambition and so on, but it's extremely difficult because we always hear the same. It's too ambitious. We will not manage. So let's settle with the minimum compromise, which, however, will not be useful in the end. It's a sad story of the European Union right now.
Yeah, but that's the whole, let's say, idea that I say, okay, this is just a moment in history where they can show innovation, the vision, and they miss the opportunity. And that's how many moments can they miss? I think that's just to show your citizens, your entrepreneurs, that in your region that they want to thrive, is to help them, to support them with it. And for me, it's always the same idea. Democracy in policies means, in my vision, is that you create a mediocre environment. And we are not looking for mediocre. We are looking for the top. We are not looking for average. If we want to compete with the big players in the world, we have to have top solutions, innovative solutions, visions, where we say, okay, this is where we are right now. This is where we want to be in 5 years. And this is what we're going to do. And yes, of course, the ideology and other types of influences, they will play a role. But sometimes if you would like to take 2, 3, 4 steps, you have to keep them aside. And that's the issue in Europe. Everyone has its own ideology, its own vision. And to align that, yeah, it's the same with making a decision in your company. It's left or right. Yeah, you can choose left and it was wrong. Okay, but you made a decision based on all the knowledge you had at that moment. But if you say, yeah, I will go left and right, of course you're right. Something will happen. You're always correct, but you will lose 50% of your investments. And that is what we not have. As a company, you have to make a choice, and the best choice, and not, we polish up the whole discussion where at the end, a very big, very nice idea becomes like a mainstream idea where more or less no one is happy with. Then I think, yeah, okay, but why are you discussing so long with so many people on country level, European level, and everything in between to come up with just this? And I think if also there the Commission could come to, okay, we're going to get rid of all those types of discussions. We want to show that we can really be another organization for our citizens. Then people will also believe the institute that the European Union is, and how they will play a crucial role on a global level.
I completely subscribe to every and each word that you just said. It's my opinion. And just to give you a national example from France or from Germany, we know our retirement system is broken in both countries. It's completely broken. It's not sustainable and so on. In Germany, we have now another government that again pushed the final decision how to reform our retirement system in an expert group, because it's political so tricky for parties to agree on a solution, because almost everyone will be unhappy with the end result. And this issue we see in almost all topics, over migration to AI policy to whatsoever. So indeed, there is a kind of risk averseness in politics. You don't want to take hard decisions that might backfire. You don't want to take risk. And I would also agree here with you, especially in the digital field, we need to do decisions. And maybe on a few decisions, we will go completely in the wrong direction. But there we need to be smart and agile enough. As soon as we see that we went wrong, we need to readjust. But not doing anything or to do always just 10% will never bring us forward.
All right, let's settle this one. after hearing Sky's take, which model would you bet on? Europe as a trust first, US, risk first, or China, speed first? Please vote below. And let's see where our builders really stand. All right, guys, so rapid fire time. So just a yes or a no, quick instincts, only that. So let's go. The first question is the AI Act written for big tech or not startups?
Yes.
Could European regulation make AI companies relocate outside the EU?
Yes.
Is following the AI Act from today one slowing down real innovation?
Yes, right now, yes.
Do founders need to break some rules to get ahead in AI?
Yes.
Oh. Should using copyrighted data without explicit permission be treated as theft?
Personal opinion, no.
Could copyright rules on AI training data kill Europe's competitive edge?
Yes.
Are ethical guidelines just a marketing tool for AI companies?
No.
Will AI ethics slow progress more than it protects its users?
No.
Is Europe doomed to be a rule maker, not a market leader in AI?
I need to say right now, yes. In the future, hopefully, no.
Are European AI startups at a permanent disadvantage globally?
Right now, yes.
My idea from the yes and the no's are nearly similar, so I expected the answers. So this is mainly about the preparing the businesses for the AI era. When scaling an AI company or building an ecosystem in it, the question I hear from founders is, but what practically steps should we take now to be ready for the AI Act? So, Kai, if you were advising a company today, what's the first thing they should do?
Yeah. So the first, and it sounds rather simple, but it's crucial step is to check first of all, is what you are doing actually falling under the AI definition? Is it AI? Actually, a step before, many companies should really not believe in the AI hype, because I do believe many things can be done by non-AI technologies still better or maybe cheaper and so on. So companies should really think long about using AI, especially Gen AI. If they want to use it, they need to make sure, again, in Article 3.1, if what they are using is also legally falling under AI. As a next step, we talked already about the risk-based approach. They need to figure out in which risk category their AI system would fall. It could be prohibited, Article 5. It could, for example, as HR tool, fall under Annex 3.5. It could, however, also be a chatbot, which would fall in the third category. Article 50 would only require transparency obligations. And by the way, here it's also important to figure out what kind of actor you are. Are you a developer under the AI Act called provider? Are you a deployer, so more a user? Also, you need to check if you maybe become a provider. And this is now very tricky. And again, one of my major criticism. There is something called substantial modification in the AI Act, which is going back to the product safety framework that the whole AI Act is built on, which could mean that if you as a deployer, so someone who is buying a high-risk AI system from a company, but changing the data set, changing certain components, you are changing the whole AI system in a way that is triggering a substantial modification. And by doing it, you suddenly become a high-risk AI system provider, which would mean you are obliged to do a risk assessment, to do technical documentation, and so on and so on. So all those steps companies need to do at the very beginning to figure out where they are inside the AI Act, or if they actually are placed outside the AI and they can completely ignore it. Once those steps are being taken and you are, for example, sure that you fall under high risk AI system because you are in category, let's say, employment in Annex 3, then the most important step is to really go through the AI governance, AI governance framework, which starts with the risk assessment in Article 9, technical documentation, and so on and so on. I think there the AI Act is rather clear in principle what you need to do. However, when it comes to details, going back to earlier remarks from me, it's not so clear what you need to do. And there, the best thing you can do right now is to look for best practices, to look for guidelines from the European Commission, but also look for international standards, because European standards from Senelec are not ready yet. And there, again, it's a little bit on each company to figure out how to behave, what to do, or to join forces, as I said at the very beginning of our podcast, which is, I think, particular for smaller companies, the best thing to do, because maybe another startup that you are cooperating with has already found a very good way to oblige with the human oversight obligation in Article 14 and is willing to share this experience and their knowledge. And maybe vice versa, you can share in return how do you approach technical documentation in Article 11. This is a little bit how I would approach it as an CEO that, however, has already a bit of capacities. If you're just alone out there with, I don't know, 2-3 people, I think the AI Act is just too much for you, to be honest. Yeah.
At the moment. But at the end, I think compliancy, and I always give my own example. I think we started, and it's not on the AI Act, but I'm more referring to ISO 27001, is that we implemented that the moment that we were pretty small. And I think that's the same, it's an analogy here as well for AI Act. If you start early, it will enable you if you grow, because at the end, your processes are there, you already took the right steps, and at the end, it will go flawless. But you have to invest time, resources, and money in it in an early stage to enable. And I think that is something what I often miss in, let's say, in the companies around me in my area, mainly then in Belgium, is that, they have to go to a certain maturity level before thinking about, okay, now we have become too big, we have maybe bigger clients, they require a kind of standard ISO or NIST or things like that to sell my product or my service. And I think, is that also not a kind of, and I'm going to say responsibility, it's always shared responsibility, but could the European Union also incentivize companies in a way that to say, hey, we will assist you, we will help you as Europe so that you're compliant, or that your processes are aligned with a very complex regulation, so that there is a kind of office where we can go and say, hey, we are a consultancy firm, we are an AI firm, we are a data company. This is the types of sector I'm active. These are the types of customers. Okay, help me, because I don't get it. And not to go to the lawyers, the consultancy firms, but really the regulators, to those that are really making the things, and also know what is coming, because lawyers will only help you based on what's already signed. But then at least the commission can assist me as a company to say, hey, this is what you know, this could be the things you could do, maybe with a kind of roadmap, but this is maybe coming based on certain conditions. Is that also something that could enable? Do you think this is a realistic use case? Do you see this really happening?
Yeah. So yes to both. It's happening finally, and I think it could be extremely beneficial. We talked already about several aspects that I partially now repeat. First of all, there are a lot of expert groups, ongoing expert groups. There's the scientific panel, the advisory forum in the future with the AI Act. Of course, there cannot be every company in. It's a rotating system, so companies are leaving after 2 years, new ones are coming in, but it will allow the broader economy to participate, to notify the authorities of certain developments, certain regulatory burdens, certain risks that have been overlooked, and so on. Secondly, the Commission, the AI office, created this service desk that will soon go live, where companies hopefully can quickly go to in person or virtually, get a quick response, not need to wait for months basically, and hopefully after leaving have a better understanding of what they need to do. Nationally, this is already existing, for example, in Germany. I talked already a lot about the Bundesnetzagentur, our telco agency that is in the lead. They have such a service desk based on feedbacks that I received from firms. It's working well. It's rather beneficial for both sides because also the authority is learning in those engagement. And I mentioned as a third and final point already regulatory sandboxes that are popping up more and more, and where in the future locally there should be kind of center of excellence where civil society, research, academia, authorities, and companies are meeting, are engaging with each other, are learning from each other, and are helping each other. To give you a very, very clear example, how strong, and again, I'm very critical on many things that are happening and where politics can get better, but here I really see a mind shift. Data protection authorities in Germany have a very bad reputation when it comes to innovation. They are said to be hampering innovation, stifling innovation, being too critical, reading the GDPR in an almost radical way that doesn't allow companies to make use of personal data or even non-personal data. Many of those, especially state DPAs, so for example from Bavaria, Baden-Württemberg in the south of Germany, they have really changed the way they are approaching companies. While 2, 3, 4 years ago, they were only talking about penalties, about warnings, about what companies are doing wrong. They are now being approached by companies very early in the, let's call it production cycle, or even themselves are hearing about company activities in certain fields, and they find it interesting and are just sending an email to this company and are saying, we heard you are doing that and that. Could you come to our place or could we come to your headquarters? So we are discussing it because what you are doing there is quite interesting and could maybe also work for other companies. And this mentality, I think, is extremely positive. And this is now my last point, could in the future lead to we talked already about the European way to do digital products and services, and allow products and services that, for example, have this kind of privacy by design, sustainability by design, safety by design, and so on, without creating very expensive regulatory requirements, but yeah, are being based on a cooperative process that can scaled up for the whole economy, because in the end it's a lot of best practices that can be reused by a lot of companies that want to be active in a similar field. So this is my very positive outlook. Hopefully it's becoming true one day, but again, I really see there a difference when I'm comparing the status quo and the plans for the next 12 months to when I started in 2014.
Okay. And of course, the Data Act is in my opinion, it always starts with data before you can build smart AI systems. And how do we go not far enough today with the Data Act? Because I think today, yeah, data is everywhere, but in a way, yeah, what you do with it is often linked to what AI system and its purpose. Today, it's let's say, in my opinion, too much segregated. The AI Act and the Data Act it should be one. It should be, I don't know, an act where data and AI is part of something bigger, because you can't decouple them anymore. Because you may not forget, I had a few discussions lately also with someone about virtual identity. You may not forget, let's say, creating a podcast to say, hey, I'm going to create an agent from one of my employees where he or she is partially 50% an agent with the rights and the permissions that that person has at the moment. But it will go further, because the agent will create output where the output is an input for the human. How far is Europe in already thinking about that, about the virtual identity of an agent, and the potential positive but also negative impact of that?
Unfortunately, I think not very much. To your last question about the implications of agents, because the European Union just did the AI Act, and for many high-level policymakers and also commissioners and people in the commission, they did their job on AI, and it ended with that, basically. And they don't want now to do further regulation or regulatory responses and so on. They will try to address it with what we have now in the European AI Act. Again, I told you that you could extend certain parts of the AI Act via implementing acts, via delegated acts, via standards, via code of practices, and so on. But substantially adding parts now, in particular in this narrative in spirit of deregulation, simplification, is probably not something that would find a majority in the political Brussels right now. When it comes to data and the Data Act, again, you and I completely agree. Already in the negotiations of the AI Act, we already said you don't address the problem of a lack of high quality data sets and data available for AI firms in order to train, in order to also deploy AI, and so on and so on. And why do you not think our AI strategy, AI white paper, or the AI Act as a law, and the data strategy and the Data Act, Data Governance Act as one piece? I talked already at the very beginning of our podcast why this was not happening, because both files or both strategies were worked on by two different work silos, two different parts of the Commission, different parts of the Parliament, and so on, that didn't have any incentive to work with each other. I can tell you, out of our trialogues, of our policy debates, when we were saying, okay, we need to mention GDPR or the Data Act, we were told, no, this doesn't belong in the AI Act. This is not part of what we are doing and so on. Which brings me again to my point that I was mentioning so often. Digital is a horizontal topic and AI is a horizontal topic. I mentioned EU treaty changes or changes in our working methods. As long as we are trying to address those horizontal topics in very narrow committees or working groups, we will never be able to create a fully convincing policy response to that. But yeah, here we are. And so far, no one in the Commission or in the Parliament would be willing to go for a more, let's say, law firm-like approach or consultancy approach where you bring in project teams with a lot of experts from different fields trying to tackle a problem. And after you are building together a horizontal solution, this team would dissolve and the people would jump to a different project. Until we have that spirit or that approach, I think we will fail and fail again to address those horizontal topics. And this would be my answer, that unfortunately things like EID, AI, data, and so on are not being thought together. And this leads us to the results that we have.
But yeah, we have to be realistic. Everything about data and AI is very complex. It's not only the element data and AI itself, but it's also the security. It's about the rules, sometimes sector-oriented approach. So I understand it's let's say it's easier said than done. I'm really aware of that, but I think they're missing some fundamentals that I think but should be for a version 2. I hope they listened to others that already said the same, like you and I, to say, hey, incorporate that in one, so that you, for example, cybersecurity, the standards, at the end, a standard is the best way to prove in a way that you're compliant to the specific regulation. Incorporate them as well, so that it's also easier. But of course, you have a lot of actors involved, and I'm aware of that, and that slows things down. But even then, they have to find a solution where they don't slow down. And I think that's the complexity of the world we're really living in right now. But I think it's challenges that we will overcome, and hopefully sooner than later. Most companies aren't ready for the AI Act, but we can get there together. How is your team preparing for it? Please drop your plans below or tag someone who's leading it in your company, and let's share ideas. Don't panic. So if this episode opened your eyes, hit subscribe and share this with anyone working in AI and data, or on a European level, or an owner or a technician. It might save them from the next big breach. But of course, Kai, before we go, let's zoom out a little bit. After all the insights on regulations, risks, and innovation. So what should be the one take today to prepare their AI projects for or their business for? What should it be?
To be very proactive, to use the legal uncertainties that we currently have with the AI Act as an advantage by trying out, by being bold in what you do without taking completely, let's call it, insane or unnecessary risks. So of course you should align with your folks, with partners and so on. You should look what other people are doing and taking over best practices. But in the end, if you are proactive, if you are bold, if you are trying out with those safeguards that I mentioned, I think you have still a very good chance to make it, even internationally. In particular, if you are trying to use this European ingredients that we are talking about, if you don't just try to copy paste Chinese or US American products, but bring in this European flavor that we mentioned during our podcast, and trying to give also international end users some things that they don't find anywhere else. And there, I think actually the AI Act, hopefully at least in 1, 2, 3 years, can actually also help and give you some ideas that you maybe didn't have before.
And looking ahead, what excites you the most?
Yeah, from the beginning, I actually was very impressed with rather simple machine learning and deep learning technologies or approaches that help me or that helped certain fields to make observations and make connections that we never thought about. So the classical example is certain things in biology that our pharma industry could use in terms of developing medicine or in terms of doing surgeries by understanding dynamics with bees, with ants, or whatsoever, and so on. And there, I really think in the next years, we will see a lot of breakthroughs by connecting dots that we as humans would never connect. And to give you an example now from my field of policy making, we see it already now that by creating data sets, for example, those 101 digital laws that I was talking about that are already applicable, that companies like yours need to follow, by creating those data sets, we suddenly see that, for example, on open source, we have 4 different definitions in 3 different laws. So crazy, but easy to fix. But so far, no one was really aware of that. We also see that there are actually areas that are working very well in certain sectors in terms of laws that then can be replicated in other sectors that can become a best practice in laws, actually. And again, this is exciting me a lot that we are doing a lot of good things in areas that can be replicated in other areas. And this will lead, I think, in the next years to really leapfrogs and huge changes in our society, in our daily life, in a positive way.
The world is watching Europe's AI experiment unfold. Every rule, every debate, every new step. Will we lead the way toward trusted innovation or slow ourselves down with our own caution? After hearing Kai's take, what do you think? Share your thoughts below or text someone who is really shaping AI policies in Europe. This one's a conversation we all need to have. And let's finish with this positive note, this episode. So thank you very much again for having you here. It was a very exciting talk, and I hope also for those that listened. So thanks again.